Creality is joining the purge-free 3D printing game with their own flavour of nozzle changer, the kli-tek. Whilst it's not out yet, Creality has shared some details about how this system works and what it can do. And if what they say is true, it's going to allow us to do something we've been asking for a long time. So today we'll take a closer look at what we know about the kli-tek system and the printers that will run it. So let's take a look. This announcement of the kli-tek system comes ahead of Creality's 2026 headliner series, the K3, scheduled for release later this year. Other than what we know about the kli-tek nozzle changer system, we have very little about the K3, but I have had some sneak peeks shared with me, so we'll be taking a closer look at them later on. For many people, one of the most exciting things here is that it allows multicolour and multi-material printing whilst producing almost no waste material. Purge waste is quickly becoming a thing of the past in the 3D printing world, and it's exciting to see another printer in the running. But nozzle changers do more than just reduce purge waste. Before we get stuck into the specifics of this machine, let's take a quick look at what Toolhead changers are and what they mean for 3D printing. Up until recently, consumer-focused FDM 3D printers have, for the most part, had a single nozzle. This means when running a multicolour print, each time a different colour or material is needed, the printer needs to cut and retract the first filament, then load the new one. Before it can start printing the new filament, it then needs to heat up the nozzle to the required temperature and then purge. This is when it uses the new filament to push out the remains of the previous filament from the nozzle, ensuring that the correct colour or material is extruding when it returns to the print. These purges have become lovingly known in the 3D printing world as poop. Flushing filament through with these purges has been an invaluable tool in making multicolour 3D printing accessible for the masses, but purging is not a perfect solution. Even when purging a significant amount of material after a filament change, trace amounts of the previous filament can still remain inside the nozzle. If you're just switching between different colours of the same material, this can result in colour bleed, where the trace elements of the previous filament mixes with the new filament and alters the colour and tone of the extrusion until it's all cleared out. A good example of this was when I was printing a mask in my video on the K2+, where the black was bleeding through into the white parts of the print, resulting in black streaks through the white on any layers which featured black sections. That's bad enough when switching between colours, but when switching between different materials with different temperature requirements, it can affect the material properties of the print, weakening layer bonds, making single extrusions brittle, and even leading to extrusion inconsistencies and blocked nozzles. But even if none of that was an issue, multi-filament printing with a single nozzle has two other big problems. Firstly, it massively increases print time, meaning a 40-minute single colour print could take 10 hours or more by adding just a second colour to each layer. But the real elephant in the room is the purges themselves. If you're doing lots of multi-filament printing with a single nozzle, you could be drowning in poop. This is both bad for the environment and also for your wallet. But there is a solution which is taking the consumer 3D printer market by force, and it comes in the form of Toolhead changers. Now, Toolhead changers aren't anything new. They've been available in more industrial 3D printers for way over a decade. But over the last 6 months or so, they've started rolling out en masse into the consumer and prosumer 3D printer market. Generally, there are two types of changers. The first is Toolhead changers, which features multiple units of the entire toolhead carriage, including the direct drive extruder gears, heater element, nozzle, cooling fans, and sensors. Each one of these has a different filament loaded, and they're all docked to one of the walls of the printer. The XY gantry can switch between mounting different toolheads to print with different filaments. Toolhead changers are great, as not only do they not need to purge during a print, as each filament's got its own extruder, but they're often able to preheat the next nozzle before the toolhead change takes place, further reducing filament swap time. However, toolhead changers can be very expensive, featuring multiple additional parts, each of which will need to be maintained and occasionally replaced. But another big drawback of toolhead changers is the size. Needing to house multiple additional tool heads means that the entire printer needs to be significantly larger without increasing the usable build volume. Nozzle changers, on the other hand, require significantly less additional space by just swapping out the nozzle assembly within the toolhead carriage. This means significantly less space is required, and there are fewer and cheaper duplicate parts to be maintained. But even with a different nozzle for each filament, removing the need to purge, if they're sharing an extruder, they often still require unloading and loading filament, which increases print time. Creality has opted for a combination of the two. The kli-tek system swaps out just the nozzle assembly, but each assembly is fitted with its own PTFE tube, allowing filaments to remain loaded between nozzle swaps. As we've seen on other printers which use a similar system, this will likely require a higher printer to allow for routing of the multiple PTFE tubes. I haven't seen an exterior shot of the K3 or even a rendering, so I can't confirm this, but I would imagine it's probably the case. If it is, the benefits probably outweigh the drawbacks of just having a taller printer, as the footprint isn't going to change. With a compact heating element contained within each nozzle assembly, and each assembly featuring its own independent USB-C cable for power and signal, it can preheat the nozzles before switching, further speeding up swap time. The actual nozzle switch time is said to take less than 5 seconds between undocking one and docking the new one. But for real-world use, what really matters is the time it takes between stopping printing with one filament and starting printing with the next. This takes into account docking and undocking, but also calibrating, heating and priming. Creality states that this takes less than 15 seconds, which, if true, is really impressive. By comparison, that's similar to the time the Bambu Lab H2C takes to swap between the left nozzle and the right nozzle of its dual nozzle extruder, but that's presuming both filaments are already loaded. When the H2C needs to do a full nozzle change between two nozzles on its Vortex nozzle changer, it can take between 30 and 40 seconds between stopping printing on one and starting on the next. So let's say that's 25 seconds difference per change, worst case scenario. That would mean an additional 20 minutes of print time for every 1 centimeter of height of your print on a 2-color print at 0.2mm layer height, and that would stack up quickly. Each nozzle assembly appears to have its own scrub pad next to its docking station, which means that there's no chance of it picking up residue from a previous nozzle and wiping it over the print, but also means that it's not wasting time traveling to a different part of the printer to use the scrub pad for every nozzle change. As I mentioned earlier, one of the advantages of nozzle changers over toolhead changers is that they tend to be cheaper, as there are fewer parts to be maintained and replaced. Whilst these nozzles do each feature a powered heater element, Creality is currently saying that replacement nozzle assemblies will cost $14 US, which, if true, isn't a bad price, providing they are reliable and durable enough to not need frequent replacement. Now, full details, including prices on the K3 printer range, which Creality are releasing later this year fitted with the kli-tek nozzle changer, aren't yet available. What we do know is the initial one released will feature 4 nozzles, which is presumably the printer featured in these early release videos. Now, I'm hoping that you'll be able to connect CFS units to the K3, allowing filament swaps per nozzle. Whilst that would then introduce purges to prints of 5 or more filaments, it would also mean that you can then print with more colours or materials if you want to, while still producing significantly less purge waste than a single nozzle printer. But this lack of need to constantly load and unload, mixed with a new assisted extrusion system, gives the kli-tek a special ability, something that Creality is really leaning into. The K3 uses a dual drive push and pull system, which when printing with flexible filaments like TPU, causes the filament to zigzag along the PTFE tube. The push gears ensure that there is sufficient slack, so that the pull motor can retrieve it without needing to fight against excessive friction or putting the filament under undue strain. They say it can print TPU 95A, 90A and 85A all in the same print at up to 7 times the speed of other printers, with a continuous flow of 3mm cubed per second with TPU 85A and speeds of 15mm cubed per second with TPU 95A. If it can reach those speeds and stick with them reliably, that is really impressive. Whilst we have been able to print with multiple different materials in one print for a while, being able to print with multiple different grades of TPU will make for some really interesting flexibility, literally, such as a demo shoe that they've been showing off for this printer, which is printed with 3 different grades of TPU plus a PLA as a solid support structure. Creality are so confident in the kli-tek's ability to print TPU that they just came out and stated that when using it, printing TPU becomes as simple as printing PLA, even when using something as soft as TPU 80A. When it works, TPU can be a really useful tool in your maker's arsenal, but it can also be really frustrating to work with. If this printer lives up to its claims, the K3 could be one of the most capable TPU FDM printers on the market. But one of the things I am most excited about here is something that many of us have been wanting for some other nozzle changes for a while, and that is the ability to use different nozzle diameters within the same print. This means you could use a 0.4mm or even a 0.2mm nozzle to print your outer walls, retaining a high level of detail, whilst using a 0.8mm nozzle to print much stronger infill, much faster, without reducing your surface quality or details. I'm really intrigued to see how this is implemented and how smoothly it works, but it could allow you to print much larger, highly detailed models much faster. If you've seen some of my recent videos, as you may expect, I'm especially keen to see how the kli-tek system and the K3 work with my free CMY painting tool, Prime 3D, which allows you to paint any 3D model in any color, including gradients, then print it with just 3 to 5 filaments. It even allows you to project a photo onto your model, and then that will be converted to be printed with CMY lines. Now, as far as I'm aware, this initial K3 at least is going to be limited to 4 colours, which means that you would need to choose between including white or black filament with your CMY colours when using Prime 3D. But quite often 3 or 4 colours is all you need. This guy was printed with just 4 colours: cyan, magenta, yellow and white. And on a printer like this, you would be able to print him using absolutely no purge waste. I'm excited to see what this printer can actually do. It's all very well and good making these big and impressive claims, but we'll need to see how it actually performs in real life, and perhaps more importantly, how it will stand the test of time. The K3 is not being released until later this year, but once I've got my hands on one, I'll be putting it through its paces and I'll show you what I find. So what do you think? Is this something that you were waiting for? And if so, are you pleasantly surprised, or is there something missing that you were expecting? This was just a quick run through of this early preview information that we've been given, but when I've got one here in the workshop, I'll give you a much closer look at what it can do. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and a hype. It is always hugely appreciated, and subscribe so you don't miss out on my future videos on 3D printer and maker tech. As always, thanks very much everyone, and until next time, happy printing. A huge thank you to my revolutionaries for your support. If the rest of you would like to join them, getting early access to my videos, Prime 3D beta access, member exclusive content and more, head to my Patreon via the link in the description or hit join below any of my videos. For now, if you haven't already, why not check out one of my videos on my CMY painting tool, Prime 3D, or pop on another video to learn something new or just have some fun. Thanks very much everyone, and until next time, happy printing.